kids don't want to be doctors or lawyers. Everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. Everyone wants the trips, the planes, the cars, the green, baby. But how do you do it? How do you get it? Welcome to Brain Drop. Brain Drop. The ultimate podcast where we bring you the secrets and strategies of 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs who've mastered the art of growing their companies through cutting-edge marketing and sales tactics. It's not about lame theories. It's about actionable, proven tactics that'll take your business to new heights. This is Brain Drop. Brain Drop. And now your host, Joshua T. Osborne.
Ladies and gentlemen, get ready for a truly epic episode. We have a guest who is nothing short of a legend in the world of health and performance, guys. With nearly 3 decades of experience, 28 years to be exact. He's not just shaped the careers of over 200 high-level professional athletes, he's left a mark on the world of sports. No fucking joke, right? And we're talking about a guy who's worked with the likes of like Odell Beckham Jr., Von Miller, Chase Young. Let me say that again, Chase Young. I love Chase Young. He was the mastermind, guys, behind the entire Super Bowl 50 winning Denver Broncos defense, right? So just think about that. Von Miller, DeMarcus Ware, Aqib Talib, right? And a roster full of Hall of Famers. Fucking you work with all of those people, dude. And it doesn't stop there, right? So you also have trained, many people in the UFC, including warriors like Matt Brown, Olympic gold medalists like Helen. What's Helen's last name? Maroulis, there you go. And countless of others whose names would fall in an entire highlight reel. Like you could get a whole highlight reel of these names of people that you've worked with. And now you're kind of bringing that elite level of expertise to the masses with your new venture, Reprogrammed by Chris Knott, where you're like on a mission to revolutionize the way that we think about health and performance. So everybody, please help me welcome the unstoppable force, the legend himself, Chris Knott.
Well, thank you, guys.
Is there anything I missed?
Well, we could keep going on, but it's been a long journey. So yeah, 28 years has been something else. It kind of ages me a little bit because I definitely don't, depends on what day it is and we're training in terms of feeling my age. But that's part of the, honestly, that's a big part of what I want to do is I want to give people that ability to make some halftime adjustments, make sure that they're living their best life in their second half of their life. You got so many people that, they dream big, they get out of college, they've beat themselves up from sports, they've done some other things, but then they go into their career world, they're making money, they're doing this kind of stuff, and then they look back and they're like, yeah, my boobs are saggy now, and I can't play with my kids. I can't even get off the floor, and I feel like crap, and all this kind of stuff. And they're like, what's the point of having all this money if I can't actually live my life? Yeah. And so actually a big part of why my name proliferated through professional athletes was they realized that, like, if we're talking NFL, you don't get paid to get to the NFL. Like most guys start off little kids, I dream of getting to the NFL. So they go through this process and maybe they're fortunate enough, they make it to the NFL and they think I've arrived, and they realize I haven't made anything yet. Yeah. Because they don't get paid necessarily to make it to the league. They get paid to stay in the league, which now means they have to stay healthy and they have to be able to prolong. They have to get that second contract, not just the rookie contract. Guys like Chase Young and Odell Beckham, so they get a decent amount of money on a rookie contract, but that's not where their real money really is. Mm-hmm. Guys like Von Miller, they've made way more money in things like endorsements, way more money in second and third contracts. Yeah. I can tell a story. I worked with both Brandon Marshalls, but Brandon Marshall, the receiver, and started with Broncos, and then we started working a lot when he went to the Dolphins and then to the Jets. And then as I kept going on, he was getting older, and I was able to prolong his career by another 2 years. Yeah. And that just 2 more years added another $5 million to his paycheck. Yeah. And guys realize that if they can stay healthy, then they can actually do their trade. And on top of that, play with their kids afterwards and not feel like they're comatose. And so this was a big message, but it really started with me because I was that typical bigger, faster, stronger, high school and college athlete. I left college feeling like I was 80 years old. I had a fractured back. I had dislocated my shoulder. Heck, doctors even missed it. So I was that typical guy that continued to compete on Toradol, and then that wasn't good enough, so it was Toradol and a 6-pack of beer and all the kind of stuff that I'm sure was really great for my liver. And so when I was done with college, I was already washed up, which is also how I started in strength and conditioning, because it's always if you're not going to be the athlete, let's train the athletes. And then all of a sudden I'm like, well, I got to fix myself, because regular physical therapy, regular athletic training, regular strength and conditioning just isn't doing the job. And then I start training athletes, and guess what? They're all broken too from their same systems that broke them down. And so I spent the next decade on a quest, and it was first to help myself, and then it was to get guys healthy, because I'm like, I can't even train you if you're broken down all the time, which then really became the foundation of my system, which really looked through the lens of neurology first. That wasn't at all even, when I first started, people thought I was working with stroke patients because they didn't have a lens of neurology. It was, we live in such a, especially American medicine, is such a anatomy base. Oh, you hurt your knee? Let's MRI your knee. Oh, we found this tear. Guess what? That must be your problem, right? I don't even think about, well, guess what? What if you have a tack in the shoe and you're running with a limp, and so therefore you step on it and then it hurts and you fall down and you hurt your knee? They're not even smart enough to pull the tack out of the shoe because they just want to do surgery, because what's the old adage? If all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And all of a sudden I realized there was no actual common sense. So forget the science. I can easily get into science and we can talk and nerd out all day long, but I would rather talk about common sense. And people just don't have it. And so I'm here to introduce common sense and a more comprehensive program back into our health, wellness, living. And guess what? First and foremost, you're not just a football player, a basketball player, a baseball player. You're a human being. And that's what we forgot, because when you go to the doctor, you're no longer a human being. You're a knee, you're a shoulder. You know, you go in with a gut issue and all of a sudden it's like, here's a pill. You know, they stop forgetting that you're a human. And guess what? The human is the most miraculous thing on this planet. We live in Colorado. It's beautiful. We look at mountains every day. I was just in LA. I was out back in the ocean, jumped in the ocean. It's magnificent. It's overwhelming. It's big. And that is nothing compared to how awesome the human is. And we forget that. And so when we stop seeing the miraculous ability of the human, we shortchange ourselves. It's like if I want to go to write a book, what does the average person tell you? Oh, write at the 5th grade reading level, because that's the average. Screw that. I want to be able to bring people up to levels, not go down and let people stay in mediocrity. And that's what we've had all the way into, and I'm sure we'll get into tons of stories. Once I got into more NFL and behind the scenes and working with teams and all that, you know, it's like the Wizard of Oz. You pull back the curtain, you realize this is this little old guy standing on a chair, yelling through a microphone, barking some things, and he's just nothing. And unfortunately, people don't realize this. And so we idolize some of these pictures and some of the prestige and all that. And you realize half these athletes, they're God-gifted talents, and they still haven't learned how to train. They haven't had people to train them and teach them and actually treat them like a human being. So that's where I was at. Fix myself, fix them. I didn't start off as a rehab guy. I, out of necessity, became a rehab guy that then became a part of my fuller performance program.
Let's talk about that for a minute. Because just so you guys know how, it's full disclosure here, I actually met Chris. As you guys know, I went through some really bad back problems. And so I ended up like pretty much almost crippled to a point to where couldn't use my legs most of the day and really bad. And got a friend that Adam Vigil, actually, UFC fighter.
Another fighter.
Yep, another fighter. Referred me over to you, and man, went to you, and like it just everything you were doing. First, I was like, what the fuck is this? Like it was you talk about behavioral and science and geeking out, but the way that in which you do, it's very I guess to say at the least next level. Like the way that you're able to retrain muscles to be used and retrain somebody to be able to use, for instance, for me, my hamstring. I was like, you would never fucking see this with a doctor, yet it works better than anything a doctor could do, and it gets rid of surgery and gets rid of all this other stuff, and it's just like, why isn't this out there more? And so when you say that you fell into recovery, I'm like, but you're like the fucking man at recovery. You know what I mean?
Well, the nice thing is I've been doing it a long time now. So just the neurotraining alone that we kind of helped pioneer, that was started about 15 years ago. So I've already been in that field for quite some time and been able to go through a lot of trial and error and a lot of, you know, just working with some really great people and, you know, figuring things out. And then, like I say, I was training for a lot of years before that already in just the strength and conditioning world, and then going through and everything got to a limit. But that's why, number one, I would say nothing great happens without a sense of urgency. You know, there's too many people that are like, okay, I got my degree, I do this. And so they stay within this confine. And there's nothing that pisses me off faster than if you say that's good enough. No such thing. And it's people that are truly hungry. That's where they'll get to a breaking point where it's like, I hit this ceiling. Okay, physical therapy only did so much. Chiropractic can only do so much. Soft tissue work only does so much. Functional medicine, but they're all important. That's one thing too. This is not okay, now I've got my way and now everything else sucks. No, I actually want to bring professionals together because guess what? There is a time and a place for a surgery. Yeah. If I've got a bone sticking out of my leg because I have a compound fracture from an auto accident, guess what? I'm not gonna go do some band exercise. Yeah. I'm gonna go have that doctor put that back in. Yeah. So there's always a time and a place, but the problem is ego, honestly. And I always say that pride and fear look very similar. A lot of doctors, a lot of whatever, we say, oh, they got big egos. Well, a lot of times it's people that are still human first, and humans have insecurities. And if their one thing all of a sudden gets exposed as not the end all be all, now they feel fear that maybe someone else might take a piece of their puzzle. And if that's the case, then they start to posture up, which then gives the appearance of ego. But in reality, they're just trying to protect their little corner of their universe instead of saying, hey, if I really want to help, because everyone that gets in my field should understand we are servants first. We're here to serve people so that those people have a better life. And if I'm really wanting to serve them, I realize I could have 17 lifetimes and still never figure out the complexities of the human, which means I need to put my head together with other true professionals and figure out how these puzzle pieces fit together. Yeah. And a big part of what I do now is it's like a business. I'm the CEO. I'm not the one on the factory floor putting together the widgets, but I knew how to put together the widgets when I started. And now I'm not the guy doing the CFO financial stuff, but I knew how to do that as well. Yeah. The CEO understands how it all fits together and therefore has the picture on the box. So many people, they find puzzle pieces, and those puzzle pieces are important, but they don't know how they fit together because they don't have the picture on the box. And that's what my career has allowed me to do is manage. And so that's what I've become now more for my athletes is more of a health manager. Yeah. Because honestly, I don't want to spend 8 hours a day doing soft tissue work and massage. Yeah. Guess what? It's a part of the puzzle, but I'm going to find that person that does that 8 hours a day and say, this is the time, but also realize that not every tool that's a good tool is appropriate at all times. You go do a deep tissue massage within 24 hours of that game, guess what? Your muscles and your Golgi tendon organs and your muscle spindles and stuff, they're not going to respond at the same neurological rate because you just lengthened everything. And therefore, for performance, that's not the ideal time. Now, do that on a Monday after a game for recovery, fantastic. So I always say, it's like building a house. Hammer's great. I need a hammer. It's one of my primary tools. Yeah. I'm not going to use it when I'm installing windows. Okay, so we got to use the right tools at the right time. But people just, again, if their only tool is the hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. And that's what we see in the professional world. So it's not black or white. It's not good or bad. I want to get people to think about asking better questions and understanding how it fits together so that actually they get the best of all worlds and understand how professionals can all serve them and everyone benefits because of that.
Awesome. Before we move on from the recovery, because the recovery is a small piece of what you do, but it to me is a huge, it saved, and realistically, it saved my life. Not only did it brought me, within 6 months, I'm today feeling better than I've ever felt in my life. I seriously feel like I just got out of high school wrestling, for 6 months, right? Freestyle, Greco, I feel totally in shape, ready to go. I just did a half marathon with my wife the other day. I was I never did that before I fucking had back surgery and then get recovery from you. Furthermore, how fast you were able to recover me. Can you explain to people what it is exactly that you do with the machine and the way that because most people have never heard of it. Never.
Yeah. And that's the thing. So, one, old habits die hard. Yeah. And there is something different. When you first came in, when you said what the heck is this? Well, part of it is there was just no framework. Now, once we got it, now you have a framework. Because if I said, oh, this is like weight training, you even if I gave you 1,000 new weight training exercises you've never done, you still have a framework to know what it feels like to pick up a weight and what muscle sort of, and all those kind of things. So it's already within your vocabulary, physically speaking. This is not in a lot of people's vocabulary yet. Yeah. And so what we're doing is, again, we got to go back to human design, which is, guess what? The structure of your body, the muscles, the firing, the absorption of force, the actual generation of force doesn't happen without your nervous system coordinating all of that first. And so if there's a guarding position, again, go back to my analogy of if I don't care, if you could squat 600 pounds and you're going to go show off your amazing squatting ability, but someone doesn't like you and they put a sharp tack in the bottom of your shoe, you're going to step on it. Your brain is going to go, ow, that hurts. I don't want to keep doing this. So it's going to inhibit your muscles' ability to absorb force. You're going to collapse and hurt yourself. Yeah. And again, now you're back into the anatomical world of, hey, doc, I hurt my knee, and they're not smart enough to think about the tack in the shoe. So it first starts with your central nervous system's ability to interpret stimulus. And if you don't look through that lens, then you don't have a framework of how all this. And that's why even when you go to the gym and someone is trying to coach your squat form, and in terms of like your body biomechanics and your breathing patterns and even where your eyes are focused, all the way to what music is like, do you have to get hyped up before doing the lift? If so, you're not going to be able to replicate that in performance, because guess what? Like, you know, how many times you've seen videos of the dudes slapping each other in the face before doing a max effort lift? I don't allow my players to do that. Why? Because even though it elicits a response in the moment, but guess what? You don't get to slap each other in the face for every single play of a football game.
Yeah.
So it's actually a false, it's a false confidence, if you will, because it doesn't translate. And there's so many things that we do in training that don't translate to why you want to do it, because very few people, unless you're an Olympic weightlifter, a power lifter, or just a complete gym rat, and that's all you do with your life, most people aren't doing that as their primary thing. They're doing it as a means to an ends for something else.
Yes.
And so if you're a football player, they don't care about how much. Now, do other egos, does every guy want to be able to bench press a lot of? Yes, of course. However, if I said I can either get you to bench press a whole bunch of weight, or be good at football, they're gonna be like, fuck the bench press, I'm gonna go play football.
Yeah.
And so again, it's a means to an end, and it has to translate, but people can't put it together. Why? Because they don't understand how emotion, and this is where we get into psychology and all sorts of stuff. Emotion actually is the fastest translator of human performance, because it's a feeling. It's like when I work with Major League Baseball players, if I have a Major League Baseball player that goes into a slump, do you really think he forgot how to hit a baseball? Of course not. But the feeling is off. And so why do they still go back to one of the most fundamental things ever, the old Little League batting tee? Why? Because they're trying to get the feeling back. It's that, yes, it feels right. Because if I give them, hey, biomechanically, well, look, your right foot is turning at 15 degrees, and before it was only turning at 10 degrees, and you had this, like, well, okay, your VMO is not firing correctly here. Like, first off, it sounds retarded, because people just want to sound smart, and they're not, because they're not getting back to what's really important, which is, how do I get them to feel right? The kinesthetic awareness, all that kind of stuff, which again is an internal neurological type of function. Even when we talk about psychology, arousal state, are you really sympathetic or fight or flight, right? Your muscles are going to tighten up, your fine motor skills. It's the same reason why police officers only shoot a weapon at the range at paper targets that don't shoot back, and they do it maybe 3 times, 4 times a year, and then all of a sudden they actually have to get in a situation, which actually most police officers never in their entire career actually have to use their weapon in the line of duty, but the times that they actually have to, they can't even hit the broadside of a barn. Why? Has nothing to do with their ability to pull a trigger. Has their ability to not control the stress, and therefore the fine motor skills start to go away, which again, that's why, you know, when I also, other side notes, I train Navy SEALs and other things like that, I have to get them prepared under duress. Yeah. Because again, all of that works together. So going back to the machine is just a tool in my toolbox. There's nothing magical. Now, the technology is great. So that's why I would never use traditional STEM, electrical devices like that, because it's not normal to the human body. Again, more science geeky stuff. But when you use the correct signaling, and just like, you know, I would never have someone try to bend their knee backwards. That just wouldn't be natural for your knee.
Right.
But there's still ways that, okay, I'm going to do it correctly, and now I can utilize the appropriate information and signaling to then get the desired response and outcome. And that's really what it is. So we're finding ways in which ultimately the body is trying to guard and protect, because the nervous system is always trying to interpret information, all sorts of stimulus, and say, do I like it? Do I not like it? If I like it, great, we're going to support it and we're going to replicate it, and that becomes your pattern. But then if it says, nope, I don't like it, it's either going to shut muscles off, it's going to go into guarding, protecting, you're going to be tense, and guess what? Tense muscles don't do a good job producing force or absorbing force, and that's where 90% of our injuries come from. It's that person that, okay, I just slipped on the ice and my muscles tightened up. You know, you can have big, like 300-pound strongman guys, and they can still blow out knees just as easily as anybody else, because in that split-second moment, in that literally 0.2 seconds it takes for the nervous system to go like contract or relax, and if you get the wrong response, now that force doesn't stay in the muscle where it belongs, the shock absorbers, now it goes to the joint where it doesn't belong, and guess what? There goes an ACL, there goes a meniscus, there goes something, and now you actually have an anatomical problem. So if we can train the body under velocity and at high loads to control, again, that fight or flight response so that you can absorb force correctly. And this is at the high level stuff, but you know what? What works for Odell Beckham works for you too. Why? Because you both have hamstrings, you both have biceps. It's not like he has some special third extra hamstring.
Right.
And so if I can take a top 1%er and make him better, if I can take an Odell Beckham who was blazing fast before I ever met him, and I can make him even faster, that's going to work for you too.
Yeah, for sure. Hands down. I thought that was really unique. You're talking about the feeling of things because that's so important. Even when it comes to business, right? You know, this is a business podcast, and so kind of want to work in some business. But when it comes to our sales teams, for instance, when a guy starts to get in a rut, a lot of it's feeling. And so I have them journal now, right? And they'll go back and they'll go, 30 days back when they had their best month and they pulled in 150 cash in the door, 150,000 cash in the door, and they'll find out that, I'm not doing my 2-mile walks in the morning. I'm not doing my morning rituals. I'm not doing this. And all they have to do is go and start doing that the next day, and immediately they're back into selling. Immediate. Because a lot of it's feeling.
Yeah, I would ask you, when you're coaching business people, how often do you have to return them back to their original sense of urgency?
Almost always. Constantly. That's the number one factor when you see somebody in business that's off. It's because they don't remember their why. They don't have that deep desire. They get away from the desire. Yep. They feel like, I can do this on my own now, or I don't need these other things. And they start to get off track, right? And it's just going, hey, remember Grandma Susie we talked about? Grandma Susie is why you're here in the first place. Now, if we can bring that desire back up and you remember why you're here, you're going to be able to reach your goals a lot quicker, right? Because at the end of the day, like if you look like Stanford holds one of the longest studies ever conducted. It was of 1,523 geniuses. And during this study, what they wanted to study was, do all geniuses become successful? Is it the genius trait that makes success? And what they found out after 75 years, the second longest study to ever be conducted, it was actually so long the professor had to pass it down to the next professor. But what they found out was it was not genius, it was not genes that came from, it was focus and persistence. It was the ability to focus and then persist day in and day out on that same subject matter, on that same why, that same desire that got people to be successful, right? And so that's kind of what you brought up. It's like a lot of it comes back to feeling. How are you feeling? What is your emotional state? Why are you doing what you're doing? And how does that make you feel? And how does that make that other person feel? And then how can you bring that to the forefront every single day so that you're fired up to do it?
And that's the main part of coaching. Yes, we have to have our foundation of understanding, but if I take a sports psychologist and he's gone through his education, and now he's saying, we're going to work on visualization practice. And they're getting people to close their eyes and visualize their play, but they're only seeing it as if they're watching a movie. They've completely missed the point. Yeah. The whole point of seeing yourself is to see in such a way that you're in the movie and you're feeling it, because that's the thing that connects. Matter of fact, I just got back. Well, I did a back-to-back. So I was just with Chase a couple days ago. And before that, though, I was with one of my favorite fighters of all time, Rafael Lovato Jr., and getting him ready. He's now, 41, and he's oldest by years, getting ready to compete tomorrow in the ADCCs, which is the #1 jiu-jitsu competition in the world. And going back, and he's got an amazing story. But he himself, has his own motto, last round, best round kind of thing. And I was talking to him specifically, and I'm always asking my guys different things and learning from them just as much as they learn from me. And I was asking him about his visualization practice. And the #1 thing he does is he visualizes his hands up at the end of the fight. So instead of visualizing, because most people, if you think about it, it's like visualizing the skill, like I'm going to do this move and he's going to do this. And it's more about the robotical thing. Yeah. He visualizes the end. He visualizes, and that's what he does in every practice. Raised. And matter of fact, when we were, it was fun because I and myself, I got into jiu-jitsu with the Six Blades family in Lovato, a couple years ago again, and loved it. And then I kind of had a hiatus for a while. I came back, and I realized it had almost been 2 years had passed. That's how fast time flies. Yeah. So I was back on the mat having a great time. And at the end of the competition practice, when everyone's dog tired and everything, he makes everyone get up and we run around, and he's like, hands up. So everyone walks around, their hands up like their victory, because they're putting together the work and every why for the end. And he's like, he pictures himself hugging his wife at the end, holding his babies, feeling the belt go around him, all these kinds of things. And so he's visualizing the feeling of the victory, which keeps him focused. Yep. And that takes him a lot further than saying, I'm going to do this particular takedown or this particular choke or this particular whatever. Yeah. And it was really insightful, and it's true. Because on a competition day, whatever work you've done to that point, that's there. Yep. If you're within 24 hours of a competition, you're not going to do some other extra practice. You're not going to learn some new skill. Yep. Whatever pattern is there, it's not going to change. You just got to let it go, and you got to trust in yourself. But how do you do that? How do you get over the butterflies? How do you get over this kind of stuff? You got to see why you did it in the first place. And if you don't have the focus, like you said, if you don't have the why, it's all going to go downhill.
Nothing you can do from there. Really, at the end of the day, that's the truth. Nothing you can do there. Well, we're working with these high-level athletes. I think a few things. Obviously, the people watching this show, business owners, 7-figure, 6, 7, 8-figure business owners. And a big thing to each and every one of them, they're pushing their performance every day. And I think that each and every one of us, it really comes back to our standards. And we start to realize in business that as we raise higher standards, our life continues to grow and grow and grow. And then you watch high-level athletes like Chris Young and like all these guys, and you're like, man, what kind of standard do they live at, right? And so I would love for you to break down kind of what you see when it comes to coaching and hanging out with these guys.
Yeah.
Like, what level do they live on? They're obviously not going out and fucking partying and doing stupid shit, right? I know for us business owners, the ones that party and spend too much time doing fluffy ass shit like that end up failing, right? They end up falling. And so, at least in the business world, that's how it is. And is it the same kind of thing when you're hanging out with the Chase Youngs and all that?
I would assume just like in business, there's a lot of individuality in it. Some people, they get a leg up. Not like, for example, not many of us have a dad like, gets us $5 million to start your first startup business kind of thing, and you just go off like Bill Gates did.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that. Some people, just like you said, we just don't have as many resources or whatever. But that urgency is ultimately what's going to get you across the finish line. However, based upon that, there isn't a single guy in the NFL, for example, who isn't genetically gifted. That's just a given. You're not going to find someone that's 5'2" and 120 pounds that just all of a sudden now is going to be a middle linebacker for the Chicago Bears.
Yeah.
All right, there is a level of that, and we do acknowledge that. But now when you're talking about splitting hairs in terms of what's the difference between a high school versus a college versus a D1 college versus a pro, and then what people think, like, there's other trainers out there, and they may be fortunate enough to work with, let's say, some NFL guys, but there's a massive difference still between a guy who's on the practice squad versus a guy who's a backup on the 53-man roster versus a top 1%er. Yeah. And that's the same thing in business. When you talk about, all right, the six-figure versus the seven-figure versus the eight-figure, they're not like it is in the. I would say if you're going to be the guy on the top of the mountaintop, there's not many people standing next to you.
Yep.
And so there is some of those principles that hold true. And what I like to say, success follows, or there's always clues that follow success. Yep. And that's where it becomes the same. So the hard thing I think about professional athletes, especially, again, because my name proliferated most and I tend to work mostly with NFL guys, it's easy for me to relate to that world. But you've got guys that are coming out 21, 22, 23 years old. They're getting all this money. A lot of them didn't come from much money. And therefore, the NFL, it's not just physical. It is a business. And we're seeing a big shift now where we're getting guys immediately right away help with their brands, help with how to invest, help with all this other stuff, because statistically over 70% of NFL guys historically are broke.
Yeah.
And it's because they didn't have some of these other skills, these life skills, the financial skills and other things like that. And then you got the injuries, you got all this kind of stuff. And they had the dream, again, thinking that they were going to get there and make it. And they realize a year later, they're already kicked out of the league just because, there went that injury and they're done. So a lot of these guys early on, you do have to deal with the partying. You do have to deal with the whatever, because just like a business guy, if you go from not having anything to all of a sudden something happens and you push the right buttons, you walk through the right doors, and all of a sudden this massive paycheck comes in. A lot of people do overspend. They go back to that childhood dream of wanting something, and the delayed gratification has to be taught. But getting guys to see this bigger picture, and I'm able to talk with them faster, earlier, and so I do end up being a little bit more big brother, kind of come alongside them. And we do, and I teach a moderation too, because as you know, you can be completely disciplined and so strict that it's almost life sucking. And then that's one of the easiest ways to forget your why too. And so helping them balance and understand where are the lines, where are the ways that you can live some life, but be frugal and continue to progress, well, think about it. I mean, again, why do we have anything? Money by itself means absolutely nothing. You have money so that ultimately you can live, but you live to have relationships, and everything comes back to people. And for me, having guys win Super Bowl rings, getting them an MVP, getting them, in the Hall of Fame, those are cool. But I'll tell you, my absolute favorite things is when I get a guy like Von Miller, when his first baby was born, and he literally FaceTimes me from the hospital right there. Like, that means more than anything to me. One of my Olympic wrestlers that I got ready for that, I guess, what year was that? That had been 2016 Olympics. And through that process, I ended up being one of his groomsmen in his wedding type of thing. Those are the things that matter to me. And living life and helping people understand how all these things, again, it's kind of like, like food for the body or body for the food, it's like getting things in right perspective, right order. And that's where most of the coaching is, because if you have someone who is genetically talented, but there's genetically talented people all the time, just like you said, the genius study.
Yeah.
There's geniuses all the time, and they
Everywhere.
don't make it. And talent is no different. And we all, again, genius is a form of talent. And so there's people that are just physically, genetically talented, and it will go nowhere. As a matter of fact, I could tell stories after story, but like one of my favorite linebackers from the Broncos, great guy, physically a better specimen than the other linebackers that were on the team, and he never fully, like, he had a long enough career to be fine and okay, but he never really truly made his mark in the league, and this is why. Because he was the backup. So at the time, Danny Trevathan was the main linebacker for the Broncos. He ended up doing it. He's still with the Bears. Or actually, I don't think he's with the Bears anymore. But he went to the Bears, and he's had a great career. Good linebacker. Steve, I believe, was a more genetically talented and gifted linebacker. Could do the job. But when Danny Trevathan went down, Steve got his shot. Steve went out there, but he didn't play to win. He played to not lose.
Oh, yeah.
And I was always trying to talk to him about, and that's where I actually, like, when I have college kids now that I'm trying to get ready for the NFL, I always try to afford them the opportunity to work out with my NFL guys because I want a Von Miller and some of the other guys to speak into them. And I lead the question because I want them to get this point. I'm like, hey, Von, if you could have a season where, or like just multiple games in a row where you had two choices. You never missed a tackle, but you never had a sack, versus you flubbed 2 plays out of the game, but you had 2 sacks. Yeah. Which one would you take? Without, half a second, without hesitation,
Boom.
I want the sacks.
I want the sacks, yeah.
Why? Because it's memorable. It makes you exceptional. It stands you out. And when you're in business, that's what I'm saying, is you have to take risks.
Yeah.
If you play to not lose, then you will not win.
Ever.
And that's the thing. Yeah. And so getting them that mindset, and then also training with that mindset of, I'm not just going through the motions. I'm not just doing it's good enough, but to train like, how can I, and that's my next number one thing is I've always, I don't know where this came from a little age, I always had this strong sense of stewardship. To whoever's given much, much is expected in return. And whether that meant like, there's ways that goes up, but the hardest part is when you have someone that is either smart, talented, gifted, athletic. There's nothing more sad than seeing untapped potential. And so when you have a lot of guys, and this is where it'll happen, there's guys that are good enough and talented enough to be all the way at the highest level, and they can get away with the partying or whatever. Like,
Conor McGregor.
I was actually going to Antonio Brown.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
I'll just might as well. Fuck it. Let's tell some stories. So, I first worked with Antonio.
You seem like you didn't want to tell some stories there.
Yeah, I always question because I also don't like to. I'll use it for illustrative purposes more so than trying to
put it out
slander
there.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
But I first worked with Antonio when he was with the Steelers, and it was kind of a weird, like, it just wasn't fit, and he kind of we did some work, and then he kind of blew me off and kind of stuff. And if you guys go back to the timeline, there was some other stuff happening in his life at the time, which he was more focused on other things that got him into trouble. So I was like, okay, fine, I don't need to work with you. And that was one of the things too. Like even Odell's one of my closest guys. Now I've been with him ever since his first when he first hurt his ankle really bad with the Giants. So I've been walking with this whole time. But when he first called me, I was at a place where I was actually almost be like, I don't even want to work with NFL guys. The travel, the everything else, I'm just like, this is stupid. And so I would tell guys right away, hey, I'm not just working with anybody. So Odell called. I was actually working with one of my other guys. I was out in LA. He's in New York. He calls me up and goes, hey, I got your name. I want to work with you, da-da-da. And I go, okay, here's my rule. The moment I care more about you than you care about yourself, I'll drop you. I won't work with you. And he wasn't used to being talked like that, like most guys aren't. And I think, though, but Odell, he's competitive, and he wants to be better, and he's always been that guy. Very misunderstood, and I understand. A lot of times I can be misunderstood, and that's why I love him. I have his back, and he's an amazing guy. And so that clicked with him, and that's probably the main reason why we're still together for this day.
Yeah.
Is that right there? But when a guy's like, I don't need another name, I don't need to work with anybody. So when Antonio was kind of like not focused, I was just like, see you later. So fast forward a couple years, he's now with the Raiders, and he's like, all right, got my act together. He calls me back up. I want to start over. He actually had me kind of revamping his whole program, and it was great for a while. I was like, okay, I'll give you a second chance. We do all that, and then again, he got his mind twisted up, that whole thing between the Raiders and then the Patriots and all that kind of stuff, and I'm just like, okay. So I just disconnected from him, dropped him, and I don't have to go into the whys or all that kind of stuff.
You can kind of look it up yourself.
But bottom line is just like, you see someone, because the dude was fantastically genetically talented.
Yep.
But where's he at now? He's not in the league, broke, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a good illustration of what can happen. And yes, guys can be that good to be at that level. And he was he could have been a Hall of Famer, easy.
Yeah.
But getting guys more into the mindset absolutely trumps the physical preparation.
Yeah.
Now, I can't race a race car in a Yugo. Yeah. It's just, you have to have at least something to work with, but you can tap into way more of that. And going back to the Steve story, like I said, if he had just gone out there and been like, you know what, doesn't matter, I'm going to go for my shot, I believe he actually, physically speaking, he could have been a Hall of Famer. I think he had that much genetic talent within him, but there's always those things. And then even talking about the locker room, like what made the Broncos, we kind of knew kind of early on, this is a special team, that Super Bowl 50 year.
Dude, their freaking defense was off the hook.
It was off the hook. But here's what we did. Because, all right, so I'm working with Vaughn, and then Vaughn's now telling everyone about me. And so we started this whole thing where Monday nights, Vaughn, like this was back when he had his Denver home. He had the amazing basement. Everyone that maybe heard, like, that was the place to be.
Yep.
So we'd have this, and he would invite the entire defense over on Monday nights, and it would be a fun team building, just like hang out with the boys, get together. But I'd have a little corner, and guys would just shuffle through one at a time. I would check them out after the game, make sure that we got everything working right. And then I would get certain guys ready for then the next game, and that's kind of how our weekly routine was. But it was routine. And Vaughn, this is when he started to really take on responsibility as a leader. Not just as a solo, like he was a maverick for a while.
He was a very big maverick. And then he definitely turned into a leader.
Yeah, and then once he started to own that, and he started taking that, and that's what he's doing with the Bills, that's what he does, and that's where, and it totally changed, and it was so great. And that's what we saw, like, these guys are special, because guess what? When you're in the NFL, there are 32 teams, and every team is talented out the wazoo. So teams that have great seasons versus teams that don't, there's two main factors. It's, do they stay healthy by the time playoffs come around?
Yeah.
And do they have team cohesion? It's what happens in the locker room that really makes or breaks most teams.
It's the feeling.
It is. Yeah. And it's like when you know that you're fighting for the guy next to you and he's fighting for you, as opposed to having 11 Mavericks on the field at one time, it just changes the game. And I've seen guys, Odell had to go through this, it was very difficult. The Cleveland, he was actually excited for, and Cleveland didn't work out. It's like, even coaches and how they write up plays can highlight and create opportunities. That's why we're so excited for him this year, because I think with Miami this year, he's already been showing me some of the playbooks, and he's just like, these coaches, not only do they know what they're doing, but they're highlighting plays so that we can be successful.
Yes.
And it's just so much different, because the talent's there, but if you can't lead the talent, it's like having 4 horses pulling a carriage, but all 4 horses are going in the opposite directions. The carriage is going nowhere.
Yeah.
And that's what happens with teams and team building and team winning. Comes back to this, and again, it comes back to the relationships and the mindset, and do I have your back, or is it competitive because I got to hold on to me, and I don't want that guy to be better than me and make me look bad and all this kind of, that was the crazy thing. So that was, what shows you one more story after that. After Super Bowl 50 and everything I did for the team, I was at the Super Bowl with them. I flew back on the plane with him. It was awesome. I had a lunch with John Elway.
Could you imagine being on the plane? Oh, you can imagine, but I couldn't imagine being on the plane with that energy.
It was crazy. It was really crazy. There's
DeMarcus Ware too. Could you imagine being around that guy with the energy right there after the Super Bowl?
Well, it's funny. He's a really quiet guy.
Really?
He's very quiet and reserved. Yeah, he's a sweet guy. And then there's other guys that are very more boisterous. And I have them all. Like, again, Aqib, very boisterous guy. And passing around the Super Bowl trophy and all that was on the plane with us, and just crazy. And then and then a couple guys get a little too much partying, and then you got to deal with that. But it was a plane ride to remember. But before that, I had lunch with Elway right before the Super Bowl, talking about everything that I had done, and this is back when I was still pretty nostalgic and a little bit naive and a little bit. I'm gonna forever be the hopeless romantic when it comes to stuff, but it's a little bit more tempered now with reality. Yeah. And so anyways, I'm thinking I'm on the plane ride home. We're going to come back, and I'm waiting for them to be like, okay, we need this. You're going to come in. We saw how good this was. I get back, and I get a letter in the mail from Broncos lawyers for trying to cease and desist, and you can't post stuff, and you can't talk about it, you can't. And it came from the head trainer, which very easy to look up the time. Yeah. The dude was older than Moses, had way more power than he should ever have as anything, was doing a lot of shady stuff behind the scenes. And it was really perpetuative. Again, it was all ego. Yeah. And that's where I'm just But
that's why that team fell apart right after that.
Right. Well, the team fell apart. This is what I said. So, one, they waited so long to have the Super Bowl celebration. Yep. In Denver.
Yeah, I remember that. I was in the streets.
Yeah. So they waited, and then as I was talking to guys, I could tell in their mindset, and their mindset was, "We're Super Bowl champs," and I quickly was like, "No, you were Super Bowl champs." Yeah. The day after the Super Bowl, guess what? You're no longer a Super Bowl champ. Yeah. And that was the difference. They started to write on that, and that attitude perpetuated in the culture, and that culture has stayed the same. And therefore, again, losing is a habit, just like winning is a habit. Mm-hmm. And that was the big thing. And I remember guys talking to me because ultimately, they lost a few guys like Malik, I think went to Miami or something like that. There's a couple of guys that would, but overall, and Peyton, obviously Peyton was one of the best leaders there is. Yeah. And a great guy. I got a really cool story with him, but obviously his body physically was at its end. Yeah. They won the Super Bowl not because of the offense. They won because of the defense. And Vaughn's strip fumble, all that kind of stuff. Why he was MVP. I mean, yeah. So Peyton physically was not going to lead a team, but he was just such a good leader. Yeah. So anyways, they lose Peyton, lose DeMarcus, and DeMarcus above Vaughn. DeMarcus was actually the defensive leader, if you will, and Vaughn had to slip into that role afterwards. But Vaughn was I would say DeMarcus was the leader on the field. Vaughn was actually the leader in terms of the team, the defense cohesion, the thing that made them a brotherhood. That was on Vaughn. And so, and Peyton on the offensive side, they would do offensive dinners and that kind of stuff. And so they kind of had a different.
They had two really good leaders.
Yes. And so anyways, but if you think about it from a talent standpoint, because Peyton's physical talent was gone anyways. Yeah. So you lose a Peyton, but you don't lose his physical talent. You lose his leadership. Even a Brock Osweiler that came in physically was still better off than Peyton, but leadership, different story.
Well, let's keep it real. Leadership is filling. Leadership at the end of the day is driving people back to the filling, getting them involved in the filling, making them have that filling every day, and they show up differently. That's leadership.
It is.
So you take away the leader, you take away the filling.
And you take away, and because success doesn't happen overnight, so therefore is a monotonous process. Yeah. And it is so easy in the monotony to lose that feeling, and that's why we have to constantly be reminded. And a biggest part of self-discipline is the ability to put yourself back into that, and also be disciplined enough to know, I don't have it today, which is why you can't do it alone. And you have to have a community and one guy, because it's very easy even for two guys. We talk about this in the reprogrammed program. Yeah. That accountability isn't just one other guy that shows up at the gym with you, because guess what? One guy says, I don't want to show up either. Next thing you know, no one's showing up. Yep. So when you have a community of like-minded people that share the same vision, goals, and sense of urgency, then there's a different fundamental current that's going to pull you through. But going back to that again, the next year, the Broncos didn't lose a ton of physical talent, but because of the leadership and because of the mindset shift, people were asking me, what do you think? And I was like, the Broncos are not going to make the playoffs this year. People thought I was nuts. And I'm like, you know what? The Steelers are going to take the Broncos' place in the playoffs. And I predicted that before the season ever began, before the first even preseason game, just because I saw the current of the mindset of the team, and I saw the loss of leadership and what was going to happen, and that's exactly what happened. They didn't even make the playoffs the next year.
Wow. That's crazy. That's crazy to think about, that how important leadership is in everything we do, whether it's business, sports, just showing up in general.
Yeah,
like
your families, your
any
whatever.
of it. Even to me, like I would call myself a leader, but I have mentors, right?
Oh, you have
and
to.
those mentors, and then when I'm thinking about it now, like the Kevin Nations, the freaking Dan Kleins, the freaking like these guys that multimillionaires, right? But my mentors, and when I think about it, what do they do every time I talk to them? Hey, Josh, remember why we're doing this? Remember how many people we're going to impact in the next 5 years? Remember that, right? And they're constantly reminding me.
Guys, do those guys also have mentors to this day?
Hell yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And it has to be that way because, again, no guy can be on an island. No leader has it all figured out.
Yeah.
And for you, again, it is a lifelong principle. You cannot fill up someone's cup by pouring out your empty cup.
Yeah.
Your cup has to overflow to fill into others. And if you're running on dry, you got nothing for them and you can no longer lead.
Yeah.
No matter how capable, how smart you are, whatever, you just can't.
You just can't. You walked in. I was coaching one of my sales team or one of my managers the other day when you walked in. And I remember talking to them, and one of the things that I'm really a big proponent of is like not chasing the thing, right? We all have a thing. Is it a Super Bowl ring? Is it $20,000 a month, $30,000 a month, $100,000 a month, whatever it is, but not chasing the thing, and how we're all actually on this planet for love and connection at the end of the day, right? And so if we can focus on our relationships and focus on love and connection and really thinking that through, what does that really do? That makes you focus on filling. It makes you focus on the things that actually will last, not the thing that shows up and we're like, oh, we hit $100,000, so what do we do? Oh, we might have sex with our wife a little bit more. We might go camping for a week with our kids and drink some beers because we made it. And then we get back to the house and we're like, well, didn't really give me the feeling I wanted. So maybe if I move this shit up to $150,000 a month, and then as entrepreneurs, we chase that. Or if you're in the Super Bowl, you chase that next ring, right? And at the end of the day, that's not what you should be doing. You should be building these relationships and understanding we're actually on this earth for love and connection. And if we can have love and connection, then nothing disappears. If the ring doesn't come this year, it's not a big deal because you still have the people, and the people will lead you to the ring. The people will lead you to that money, right?
I think I was working on some of our equipment, and I kind of was keeping an ear perked at the conversation. I remember hearing you guys talk about one individual who was talking about putting like, oh, I'll drop people to get to my goals.
Yes.
Thinking that was a good thing when it's like, no, the people are the goal.
Yep.
And if you go for the relationship and for the people, the goals happen, not the other way around.
Yep.
And it makes you think about like, all right, I've had some pretty great nights with some of my NFL guys.
Yeah.
Right. We've it's a perk of the job, of course.
Yeah.
And as good as those are, by the next morning, whatever the feelings you had on that night, they're gone.
Gone.
And some of it, I even talk to my guys. I'm like, and some of them are like, wasn't that awesome? Or like, hey, do you want to go do this? And I'm like, you know what, guys? Like, yeah, those things are cool, and maybe they're great for social media or whatever. But I'm like, some of these, you go to Miami and you go to some of the schwank places. I'm like, I'm standing right next to you and I can't hear a word you're saying. And I go, I would much rather go and have a nice dinner so that we can have a conversation.
Yeah.
And actually hear each other's hearts more.
Yep.
Because that's what's going to carry into tomorrow, not how good was that steak last night or how cool was that Drake came out or whatever. Okay. But and yes, have experiences, but people get things too blown up out of proportion. And that's the thing is we are now in a much more flashy culture, social media, it's the start and the end of the world kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's this, whether it's the FOMO or the thing, and like you said, that kind of becomes the goal, especially if you haven't come from that, and that becomes the idol.
Yeah.
And they lose out what makes it worth it in the end. And it's like, and even so me, like, I was having this conversation with someone else the other day. I was saying, because of the nature of my job and the ability to travel, I've gotten to experience some pretty cool places.
Yeah.
But when I'm training my guys, I'll tell one story. When Brandon Marsh, when I was trying to prolong his career, he knew I need to train with Chris. At the same time, he had a wedding anniversary and a promise to his wife that he had to fulfill.
Yep.
So he's like, okay, I got this dilemma. I told my wife I'd take her over to France, but I got to train. So guess what? I went to France with him.
That's cool.
and it was really cool. I've had some great stories. I mean, one day, the whole trip I rented a motorcycle. I went all the way from southern France all the way up to Monaco. Best motorcycle ride of my life. Yeah. Like things that are impactful. Remember, and travel is important to me. And I loved it. But here's the thing. He's with his wife. I train with him, maybe 1-2 sessions a day, 1 to 2 hours. And the rest of the time he's with his wife. So where am I? By myself. Yeah. And I'm totally fine. I love being solitude. I love being,
well, fuck, you're in France.
Well, I'm in France, right. But I think about it, and then I'm just thinking, as much as that was cool, it would have been 1,000 times better doing that exact same thing with somebody.
Yeah.
I think about like my daughters, or I think about the other things. Like, so when I'm gone, and some of the hard things for me is, even as a dad, is like, I miss my daughters getting ready for prom kind of thing. And it's those little, and again, it's not they're not angry, they're not whatever. It's just, if you miss out, and that's the thing. And you look back, it's like, okay, do you want the Drake concert, or do you want the people you're with? Do you want the relationship with your daughter, or do you want to say, I was on this yacht? Now, if we can find a way to have both, and that's part of, I think, where we're going here is, let's freaking make some money. Let's do some stuff to afford opportunities, because what I really want is, I want the yacht, and I want my daughters with me.
on the yacht. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's why, it's actually,
I want Drake singing them happy birthday.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. And so, but there has to be, again, the steps, and a lot of people want to skip the steps.
Yeah, they do. And the steps are what? It is the work at the end of the day.
Well, yeah. I mean, I didn't get here. Like I said, I've been training for 28 years.
28 years. That's a long time.
I didn't start day one, or even year 4, year 5, getting to do this kind of stuff and being able to afford that. And that's why, one of the reasons why you and I are doing work together, because even then I'm just like, okay, I need more. Because hands down, the number one resource you have is your time.
Yeah.
It's one of the few things. Your health is close. Now, the nice thing is we have some tricks in the trade. We can reverse some of the health stuff.
Yep.
But one of our statistics is talking about entrepreneurs and cardiovascular disease and heart attacks and all that kind of stuff, and the increased risk of being an entrepreneur and having cardiovascular episodes. And if you're an entrepreneur that is also obese, it goes up by another 4-fold.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy numbers. And it's like, all right, you want to work this much to have money to create opportunity, only to then be dead?
Die?
And have your kids do that with some other dad?
Yeah. My whole turning point, like obviously back in the day, before I met you, but I was on the beach with the kids. I was actually 375 pounds. I'm sure you can see pictures of it online and everything. 375 pounds. I'm walking with the kids, and I'm like, I'm winded. They're running everywhere, and I'm like, wow, if one of them runs down to the ocean right now and gets carried away, there's no way I can get down there. Furthermore, I had chafe like a motherfucker, right? Yeah. And so I'm like, I got horrible chafe. Did I have a lot of money? Yeah, I was a multi-fucking millionaire. And I was like, fuck this. This sucks. Sitting on Huntington Beach, overweight, hot, can't keep up with my 3 and 5-year-old fucking sons. And I'm like, something's got to change, right? And like that's what happens sometimes when you get caught up in business and you think that chasing the thing is the right thing to do, right?
It is hard. So even me, I am still making my own halftime adjustments.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying is I am going all in on some of the things that we're doing so that I can, in essence, buy back time. Yep. Because right now, I still give away a lot of my time for others.
Yep.
And I'm to the point where I'm like, I can't put a price tag on that.
Yep.
So guess what? I'm going to buy back some time. But the point is not the thing, it's the time. When I bought, my boat this last year, it wasn't so that I could say I have a boat. It was so that I could take my girls and be like, well, guess what? You don't want to be on your social media. You want to go on the boat, right? Yeah. So guess what? Now I got my girls on the boat, and we're out wake surfing and doing some fun stuff. And they get to invite their friends. So now it's like, all right, because I don't want them going off to some other person's house to be with their friends somewhere else, and I don't get to see them.
Yeah.
I don't want to take them away from their friends.
Yep.
So guess what? Buy a boat, grab the friends. Now everyone's together, and now I get to have a relationship.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And that's really it. So I want to dig in a little bit, because when you think of when I think of anybody that's ever really made it in business, it was their ability to turn pain into pleasure for themselves, right? And so I think as human beings, there's we either move towards or move away from pain, and we either move towards or we always move towards pleasure, right? And so I'll give you an idea. Like when you think of the guy that created Honda, for instance, I don't know how much you know about Honda, but when you actually look at his story, he was in school and actually underneath Toyota at first, and he was in this school and he was building stuff, and 2, 3, 4 years passed, and finally he's like, I got something, I got a piston, and then he brings it over to Toyota, and Toyota's like, nah, that's fucking stupid. Go back to school. You're a retard. And so they send him back to school the whole time. And by the way, this is the guy that created the piston. All of you are fucking driving around with it right now, unless you're in an electric car. But he goes back. They send him back to school. He spends 2 more years in there. Didn't even work on the piston, but it was always on his mind. And finally, Toyota goes, you know what? That was genius. They buy it from him. Within 3 months of purchasing from him, and they're getting ready to have him go and run a factory with it. War happens, breaks out, so that postpones it. So now he wants concrete to try to build his building. He gets halfway through building his building. Boom, no concrete, can't finish his building, figures out how to do it himself, gets it finished up. Boom, he's in there in the building, like starting to create, run out of metal. Boom, his thing gets bombed twice. And then he goes on national TV, or TV, not national, but in their area, and says, "Thank you so much for bombing me. We're able to use all these missiles that have been dropped for the metal to create the pistons." And so he's got teams of people out on the news, teams of people out picking up fucking missiles to be able to turn that pain into his pleasure, turn that pain into what he's doing. And what's crazy is, like, finally got to a point in the war to where, like, he's like trying to create these pistons, and he goes home one day and he can't even afford gas in his car. Like, there's no more gas out there. So he's like, what if I take a motor and do a smaller one and put it on a bike? And that's where motorized bikes came from, right? And that's where Honda was created. But it was through all that pain he was able to, instead of giving up, right? Which I believe this is the same for a lot of athletes. When you look at them, you look at their backgrounds, you're like, they went through a lot of pain. Right? One parent died, this parent, like, struggle, like a lot of pain, a lot of struggle is what they went through. And that's the same with, like, the largest businesses out there, right? Is like you really see a lot of pain and a lot of struggle that they went through, especially with, like, this guy in Honda. And, like, I wasn't a big Honda supporter, but you can ask Russ, one of my video guys over here. I made him buy a Honda after I actually dug into that business. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And so, like, what do you think, and what percentage of athletes that you work with that had to go through that pain and had to work through that pain to become the divine and elite specimen that you helped them become today?
Right. So there's a couple different things to hit on with that in mind. Number one, realize if you want to be great, so just statistically, so every year there's over 4 million kids that start high school football. So out of that, and every year, anything of the atrophy, right now, there's 32 teams. After they go there, they start with 90 guys at the preseason. By the time they whittle it down to the start of the season, they have 53 guys. So 32 teams, 53 guys, that's 1,696 players in the NFL in a given year. So percentage-wise, 4 million every year to start from.
Every year.
To 1,696 players.
Yeah.
Okay. So the reality is there's a lot of people that go through pain, and there's a lot of people who also choose not to go through the pain. And ultimately, the story is they don't make it. Mm-hmm. So if you really are determined to make it, you will have to go through fighting pain, whatever. I love the one dude that interviews business, like pulls up on the side of the road and interviews them to try to get their, like, you know, what advice would you give to new people, blah, blah, blah. And he's and at the end of the day, like, one question, it's, have you ever been broke? I don't think I've ever seen one of his interviews where the business person didn't say,
like, no, my daddy gave me $10 million.
Yeah, right. I've never heard that. I don't know how I got here. I got the Ferrari because daddy was nice. No, I never heard that interview. I've always heard, and they almost laugh it off like, of course. Yeah. Of course I was broke. Of course I went through this. Of course I lost this. And the same thing. It's like, if you want to make six figures, you're gonna lose thousands of dollars to make six figures. If you want to be a millionaire, you're going to lose thousands of dollars to be a millionaire. If you're going to be a billionaire, you're going to lose millions of dollars to be a billionaire.
Yeah.
Okay, and so
there's levels.
It's levels, and that's the process. Just like, you know, you don't hand a sixth grader my PhD thesis and say, do that, right? You do build up, and the better teachers you have, the helpful you are. Just like having better mentors, having better process, better programs. You don't have to always recreate or reinvent the wheel to do so, but. And that's why we're here. We're here to help people learn from our pain so that we can help them. And honestly, my job is not to help them. It's like parenting. I'm not trying to keep my kids from pain. Yeah. I'm trying to teach them how to not to go through the same pain I went through so that they can go to newer levels of pain. Yeah. Again, I want them losing millions to make billions, not losing thousands to make tens of thousands. Yeah. And so there is that. And so I wouldn't even say, maybe this is verbiage, but I don't say I'm moving towards, I would say I'm just embracing it because it's a reality. Yeah. Pain is reality. And if you want to get stronger, you have to go through pain. Yeah. If you're just doing some easy ass workout that has no stimulus, then your body's already like, I can already do that. So why do I have to change? And that's the number one thing, is the willingness to go through change. Yes. Because that's what's inevitable. Mm-hmm. And if you're not willing to change, if you're at status quo, and that's the hard thing, that one of my first messages when I start working with one of my NFL guys is, you've done X amount of things to get to this level. And if you haven't, and most of the guys came to me because of pain, because they were injured. And that's why, again, even though my performance programs is actually what I love to do, it's actually the majority of what I do. But again, a Chase Young would have never even known about me if he didn't tear up his knee.
Yeah.
It's when he tore up his knee that another player who I had worked with, who was a mentor of his back in Maryland, said, if you want to get back, this is the guy you need to call. So I get a cold call from Chase Young saying, my mentor says, you're the guy, so I'm going to come work with you. And there's a whole story because I went through my own patellar tendon, and that's where a lot of doctors and therapists, you ask them what's their worst injury they've ever rehabbed from. It's like, what, a stub toe or something? Like, it's kind of pathetic that how many leaders and experts we have who have never lived it.
Yeah.
And so anyways,
that's college, by the way.
Right, exactly. I've lived my injuries, and that's what gave me, because I'm like, I don't want to feel this way.
Yeah.
So I had to embrace pain, literally, and therefore create change to do something different. Because and I always tell them, whatever got you to this point is not going to get you to the next level. Why? Because if it would already get you to the next level.
Yeah.
Which means you have to expand no matter what. And if you only do what you've done, you've already going to get what you've ever got.
Yeah.
And so I have to teach guys, okay, you have to let go. Now, that doesn't mean we discard everything, because there are things that do work. I don't have to reinvent a wheel, but I can make it better. And so they know that if you're going to get to a next level, you have to do that. And if you want the next level, if you're determined to get the next level, you will find those things, and those things also. And it's amazing. It's like, do you get lucky? Well, I work really hard, and guess what? It looks like I get lucky because I put myself in opportunities to be successful. But if you don't put yourself, I can't win a race if I don't jump in and run.
Yeah.
And so, these are some of the more things about, I would say, the pain of change. Matter of fact, I'm a big proponent of the former, like you talk about, like the 60s and 70s of the Soviet Union in terms of their preparation, their sports psychology. So even though I do have a sports psychology background, I spent most of my time studying more Soviet sports psychology. And there's a couple of things, like number one, like in America, we tend the word personality, like, oh, that's just my personality. And actually it allows us to have a cop-out, like, oh, that's just who I am. No. Bottom line, every single human being is schizophrenic. We all have multiple personalities. It's basically which person is going to show up on a given day. Yeah. Or when people say, oh, Chris, they look at my training and say, you must be super disciplined. Well, it's not so simple, because guess what? I'm human too. There's areas of my life I'm incredibly disciplined because I've worked at it hard and I had a high desire to be good at that. So I had to be disciplined. But guess what? If I open up my Monica's closet, there's a few things that I'm like, guys, I need more discipline over here.
Yeah.
So there's no such thing as universal. Like if someone says, I'm really smart, well, you might be super smart at math. That doesn't mean you're good at playing the piano. Yep. So again, understand that we're all in a process. And if you're going to get better, you have to face the idea of change. And that's what we don't want. So in the sports psychology of the former Soviet Union, when they were bringing up young kids, so basically from the ages of like 7 to about 13, one of the things that they were always evaluating was they would look at a couple things. They would look at their competitiveness, because if you don't have a competitive attitude, if you're just kind of like, oh, laissez-faire, like, it's that kid that's playing Little League and he's just playing with the butterfly, he might not be the one that's going to be best suited for a highly competitive environment. And he might find it in a different means, let's say. Yep. So they look at competitive. They look at pain tolerance. Like, can you handle pain, and where does your mind go? They look at things like, are you better suited for like an individual sport like wrestling, or are you better suited for a team sport? Matter of fact, the sports psychology that I utilized because I was mostly a team athlete growing up, football, baseball, and stuff. But when I started competing at the world level in jiu-jitsu, the stuff that I used for my team sports psychology for myself didn't work at all. And I had to make adjustments because in an individual environment, it's very different. Wow. And so I had to employ different sports psychology tactics to prepare myself and overcome the butterflies and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things they would look for is willingness to change. And so they had these tests and whatever to rate these things, because if they were always adverse to change, then they knew they were not going to exceed to other higher levels. Yeah. And they would literally be able to place people in their to help them succeed. It's like if you have no, like, if you're completely tone deaf, why would I try to put you in the singing competition? Yeah. Kind of thing. So it's like, and the same thing in training. I always work on people's weaknesses to bulletproof them, but at the same time, it doesn't mean I'm neglecting their strengths, because it's their strengths that's actually going to get them to be champions. Yep. But what I would say is if you don't focus on your chinks in your armor, your weaknesses, those types of things, those will end up being your limiting factors of your greatness to be even greater.
Yeah. You know, the biggest fucking excuse I hear all the time, and I know it's just protecting them from having to change, is people like to use the word intent. It seems like everywhere you go now, and I'll break this down and I'll explain what I mean and see how this applies inside football and inside NFL as well. But like, if you really think about it, most people go and, they'll have a conversation with their wife, and they'll go in there and they'll start explaining it to her and try to get it. And she doesn't get it exactly the way you're trying to explain it. And then they walk away, leaving their wife pissed off, and they go and they come and talk to me and they're like, well, I left her. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, well, I had good intent. And I was like, fuck your intent. You're optimizing for intent. And really what you need to be optimizing for is result. Because if you don't get the result of her understanding what the fuck you're saying, you're sleeping on the couch for 2 weeks.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so people go out there and they say intent so they don't have to do the work. And it's almost like this excuse so they don't have to change and they don't have to put the work in. When in reality, it's like we should be optimizing for result, right? Like that's the number one thing that we should be optimizing. I feel like a lot of NFL or high achievers, I know at least in my companies, they're optimizing for result all the time. And intent no longer matters. It's like intent is good. It leads you in the right direction. It starts something. But unless you get the result, what does intent mean anyway?
Yeah,
right?
It is, and it's the same. It's not the quite same that you're saying, but it's the same reason why early on I knew I had to leave like any kind of corporate work. That's why I never went back to work for a team. I mean, my first like true professional team, I worked with the Colorado Rockies in the baseball world, and I saw the cog, the organization, all that kind of stuff, and it was basically like stay in your lane, all that. And I had another corporate job for a while, and that I never work well in that environment, just because what I couldn't stand was the quote unquote boardroom meetings, the brain dumps, the hey, we're gonna brainstorm. That's another thing. Like, okay, because people would come in and they're like, they write out and whiteboard and great idea, and everyone would high five at the end. Great meeting, great ideas, and I'm like, what changed?
Yeah.
And that was the thing that was most frustrating, because everyone had great ideas, but no one talked about what they were going to do to implement the ideas to actually create change. And that's kind of more what we're talking about. Or another one, like in this, I'll be honest about myself, like, because I found this, I would get more defensive. Like, let's say that an argument blows up, and I get more defensive because I'm like, but you're making a judgment about me but that's not what I was meaning. Yeah. And I would almost self-destruct the conversation even more because of my defensiveness, because I'm now defending what I meant, as opposed to being like you're saying, instead of just changing the result. What do instead of changing my focus on, instead of defending myself, what can I do differently to actually communicate more effectively, to actually do this? Or do I need to have better boundaries? Do I need to do X, Y, and Z? Do I need to, right? And so again, the idea of, can I take a step back? Yeah. Can I reevaluate the situation? And that's what I do in training is basically saying, all right, this isn't getting the results.
Are we even optimizing for the right thing?
Yes. Yeah. And it's like, and another thing is people tend to operate out of their comfort and their strengths. So if you have, and here's very common. So one of the reasons why a lot of athletes do fail, because they're forced to do your traditional strength and conditioning program, and you'd be very shocked to understand that not all, there's some good programs, but a lot of programs at the D1 level and even in the NFL, they're not great strength and conditioning programs. A lot of it, and as you know, the higher up the ladder you go, a lot of times people get their job because of who they know, not because they're truly qualified.
Correct.
And then we set up systems to always pass the buck. For example, it's like if an NFL guy gets injured, first off, oh, that's bad luck, and injuries happen. We make excuses for it. And then they go to the trainer, the doctor, whatever, who says, okay, and so they do their icing, their taping, their this, and they're like, okay, so we took care of the acute injury, but it's not really taken care of because they didn't get to the underlying real problem. And then they send them off to the strength and conditioning coach, who goes, well, your bench press went up and your squat went up, so I did my job. And then they go out there and get injured again because, again, it's such a piecemealed system, and therefore no one has to truly take responsibility, and no one's there to blame. And therefore, guess what happens? Their metrics are the wrong even metrics. It's like if I say my NFL guys got bigger, faster, stronger, but if they don't have more catches, if they don't have more other things, it's like, it's still not the right result. Yeah. And so people tend to stay in their strength. So if you get a guy who's like, he loves the weight room, where's he going to spend his time? And let's say even in the weight room, let's say he's like, I'm a long-legged guy. I got a short torso. So he hates squatting, but he's like, but I'm really good at bench press. Where's he going to spend his time? Bench pressing more. Because he feels good about it. And it's all about stroking his ego.
Yep.
And staying within that, as opposed to, like, for me, I got super proportional. One of my assistants is 6'5", and we have the same leg length. And I'm 3 inches shorter than him.
Yep.
And so, like certain like squat, whatever, that was always harder. Other exercises came easier. But in my mentality, I'm like, I'm going to do the thing that's hardest and bring that up, and then keep getting better at the other things as well. But it was that mind shift of do the thing that sucks, and then it kind of bleeds over into everything else. But a lot of people just don't. And so they stay within a comfort bubble, if you will. And we do that relationally, like you said, going back to what I was saying. And in the argument, it's like, if I can just feel like, because how many times I just want to be heard. I want to be understood. And so if I fight more but that was my intent. That was my motivation. That wasn't what I meant, as opposed to, well, what do I really need? Because the bottom line is someone else is coming into, if I put it in the context of relationship, and if I care enough about the relationship more so than my self-preservation.
That's right.
Then I can be like, what does this person need?
And what's the result we need?
And how can we go there? Because at the end of the day, what do we really want? Do you want, and this is the hardest thing, and you can find out people very well, and if you want to keep them in your circle, not is when you get into some type of discord, do they value winning or do they value the relationship? Yeah. Because realizing that sometimes the pain and saying, I don't have to win, but ultimately I do win because I get the relationship, and if that's what you really want. But if someone is willing to sacrifice a relationship so that they win, that's what they want. And I'm a firm believer of this. I do believe you get in life what you want. Yeah. I really do. Yeah. There's a lot of people who could say, I'm homeless or whatever, and it's not because they have to be. And I'm not trying to be, and yes, there's always the exceptions or whatever, but at the end of the day, most people in most situations, you get what you want. And if I want a relationship, I'll have the relationship because I'm putting that above my own immediate need, my own or because maybe my pride is hurt, or maybe it's because I feel exposed, or fill in the gap. If you've probably worked with plenty of people who they really did want money, not the relationship. Yeah. They got money.
They got money. Yeah.
They got money.
Yep.
But did they lose in the end? Maybe so. In my value system, they still lost.
Yeah. Me too.
But it's like, okay, and that's, it's always a question of how much is not. For me, there's the stewardship side, which means there's never an end, there's never enough in life, but it doesn't mean it's the same thing. I can get to a level of comfort financially, let's say, because that now supports a newer goal, because I want that goal to continue to grow and increase. Yeah. But if it's only just about the one thing, and this is where I can make this full circle about how I look at even training the human body. If I'm that doctor that only sees a knee, you might be a great surgeon and do a great knee surgery, and you're needed, absolutely. When Chase had his knee surgery, Dr. Andrews did a great job putting, a lot of people don't even know, the ACL was easy. What was reported is, he tore his ACL. Well, yeah, he tore his ACL, but they don't know is his patellar tendon was completely flayed open. Like how if you unwind a violin string and how the bow, and it actually like flays into like a horse's tail looking kind of thing. That's what his patellar tendon looked like. Wow. Dr. Andrews didn't even know if he was going to make it back into the league. And so fortunately, we got to learn from me going through my own process of fixing my own patellar tendon, so I could evaluate what did I do well, what would I have done even better, and the things that I would have done even better is what I implemented with Chase, and I really believe that was a big reason why he's doing great today and got him back. However, if I only treat him as a knee, if I didn't cover some of these other things, he might not still be playing, not just because of the knee, but because of, again, the mental, the relationships. I mean, and that's the thing we talk about. We talk about our relationships. We talk about the stuff that really does derail most people in general, let alone these NFL guys, because if you think about it, if they're having a bad time on the field, there's usually like fighting with the spouse, the blah, 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 the other things that happen, the business deals. I mean, the amount of stress that Odell went through just to finally get paid what he was deserved by Nike. Yeah. I mean, to see his countenance after that was resolved, it was like the dude was like 50 pounds lighter. Wow. And that took a toll, and therefore as a good coach, I knew, because it wasn't like we were going to stop training, but I had the days where I'm like, you are just not, your body can't recover, not because of physical recovery, your body can't recover because you're under the weight of this stress. All
this mental stress.
And I have to take that in consideration in the totality of your program. Yeah. And there'd be days where I'm just like, where he'd just walk in and you just see it, I'm like, I'm completely scrapping what we had today.
Yep.
We're not going to do nothing because nothing never gets you anywhere. There's always something to do, but I'm going to change this up because I want you to leave this training time where you feel accomplished.
Yeah.
You feel like you've still taken a positive step forward because that's going to help you in this other thing, and you'll feel rejuvenated, not just beaten down even more. And if I had given him the workout I had written for that day, it would have just beaten him down.
Yeah.
And then,
dude, this is the same for business owners, by the way, because business owners, like, they go through and they're like, they struggle and they struggle and struggle, and like they're pushing, and we're always pushing the boundaries, right? We're like hustling, or we're just pushing the boundaries, trying to make things happen. But then we neglect our health, right? And so we start neglecting our health, and then we keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing until finally we're just so overwhelmed that we break, you know? And when in all reality, we should have slowed down, and we should have utilized kind of like what you're doing with Reprogrammed, right? Is like the awareness, the tracking, the accountability, and really got our health under control, because by getting our health under control, we can utilize that. It's just like him getting his mind under control. We can utilize that when your health's under control, your mind's under control, and then you can go back, and when you're doing those days of work, it's like in a single day, you get done what you would have done in a month, you know, because your brain is so fresh, your body's so fresh.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's almost the same thing there. But yeah, I think most business owners, that story you just told right there, connect with that, because there's so many things that there's things on our mind sometimes, and we let other areas of our life falter. And it's not like we can't do anything about it. We just haven't started yet. And so once that deal got over and you started coaching him through that, he came around, obviously, and look where he's at now.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. And sometimes it's not me just being the guru and doing it. It's really just walking with people.
Yeah.
And that's what you do when you're coaching others is they're not always needing you to give them some like nugget of truth that they just didn't know.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's reminding people, yes, you do know this. I'm just here to walk with you so that you can accomplish what you know to be true. Yeah. And that's the thing is, and people want some magic nugget when at the end of the day, it's doing the right things consistently over time. Yeah. And if you do that, and then you're able to make course corrections, you have to have the map. I don't just get in my car and just be like, I'm going to drive. I usually have a destination in mind. I tell people, I was like, if you and I jump in the car and I say, let's go to the ocean, you're like, cool. And you're thinking Atlantic and I'm thinking Pacific, we're going to have a problem. Yep. So we have to label, no, let's go to the Pacific Ocean. You're like, cool, we're in agreement. Now we start heading west. We know we're going to go west, not east. Yep. But then all of a sudden, let's say we get halfway through Utah and there's a hole in the middle of the road and there's a detour sign. Okay, great. We're going to make a detour, but we know because we have a compass that eventually we're going to head west again. Yep. And as long as you know your direction, your true north, your west, whatever direction you choose, then you can handle the detours. You don't have to be afraid of the detours. And you be smart enough to navigate around the detours because you have the map and it makes sense. And that's really what I mean. I'm just, again, you're a guide, you're whatever, you're a support. You're the guy that says, oh, well, this time, maybe I'm the guy that just, you just blew a tire. So guess what? We have a spare. I'm going to change your tire. Yep. And sometimes you need that. Sometimes you just need to fill the gas. Sometimes you need to change the tire. Sometimes you just need to put on a better song on the radio. And
that's why I think Reprogrammed is working so well, because you're just in there. You're just leading. Well, first you're just bringing things to people's awareness of like, hey, this is the right thing to do. Maybe they're doing the right things in certain areas of their life, and you're letting them know, hey, this is the right thing to do. Yeah. And then you're leading them into the next thing that we all need in our life is tracking. It's like, how do we know we're doing something good or not? What inputs do we have that we can track, right? That is going to give us the output that we desire, right? The last thing that I see you doing really well inside of there is accountability. When somebody doesn't do the inputs that they need to do and the things that they need to do, you bring it to their awareness, you hold them accountable so they can get back on track to get the result.
Totally. I mean, the car analogy always works well. We've talked a lot about cars, and I tend to use a lot of car analogies. But in that same thing, we were just talking about heading west. Yeah. Imagine if your tire pressure was getting low, but you didn't have a warning gauge. Yeah. And all of a sudden, if you let it go, now eventually you do have that could completely derail the trip. But guess what? If I pay attention to the warning lights, now I can do something about it before it becomes an issue. So that's the first one. I'm increasing the awareness. Yep. The second thing is tracking, like you said. It's like, I don't want to, all right, I know that we put in a full tank of gas, but if I didn't have a gas gauge to track it, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh crap, I know I've got 50 miles, so I got to better find the gas station for the next 50 miles. Or once again, you end up on the side of the road derailing the trip. Yeah. So that's the tracking side. Yep. And then the accountability is like, imagine I'm driving, but I'm falling asleep at the wheel. You're there to help me stay awake so that we can keep driving and not get into an accident. Yeah. So again, if we use these things, and that's where, again, success has clues. If we follow these things, and a lot of the business owners and stuff that we're now going to be gearing towards, because now I have this passion to be like, you guys have busted your butts. Yep. you have this stuff, you have means, but you're missing out on the life of why you originally, I mean, if you think about it, your first, when the teacher first asked you, what do you want to be when you grow up? It wasn't, no one says, I want to have this dollar amount.
Yeah.
They have a dream of being something that creates passion and excitement. And then as you grow up, it usually gets involved with the picture of your life. You picture a life that you want. You don't picture the job as much as you picture the life. Yeah. And then all of a sudden we get sidetracked because it does become about the bills and about the money. And then you're like X, Y, and Z. But okay, you figured out some tools. You've been successful. You've got the money. You've got the means. And now you're like, oh, but I've lost the picture of my life. Yeah. And now it's like, okay, I want you to have that because guess what? The next generation needs you to lead that, but you don't have to be daunted by it because you already know how to be successful. I just need to reorient that. That's why we got reprogrammed. We're going to reprogram the program that you already knew that was successful. We're going to reprogram it in just a different context. And that way you don't have to be afraid of it. And we're going to implement these things in ways that you've already done in other ways that you did know how to do. I'm just going to be now your new CEO of your new business, which is now your health and your body so that you can have this life.
Dude, and it's working amazing for me. Like I've never felt better in my life. I mean, as you guys know, I'm a part of this program. I've never felt better in my life, right? And like if you really think, if I really think it through, it's like I've had me and Danelle talked about this. I have so much stuff dialed in, right? I have multiple 8-figure businesses. I have fucking $1 million houses and cars all paid off. My bills are less than most people that live in a fucking apartment, right? And so it's like crazy how much I can dial things in other areas of my life, but I've never really focused on fitness until I met you. And then once I did that, the rest of my business the stuff just blew up. Like I'm going crazy, like got a capital company kicking off. I got like all this fucking shit, right? Like just one thing after another. And it all comes from having the energy and the health. And really guys, once you build in that health in that physical fitness side of things, you have the energy to go and do more, right? You have the energy and capability to go do more, and your confidence goes through the roof. And that's what I've felt.
Well, that just kind of gave me a light bulb of another really important point, which is if you're going to be great, there is a level of selfishness. Let me rephrase that. The world can now label you as selfish. Yeah. That has to be a requirement to truly being great, because just knowing the commitment and what it takes to be great, if you're not willing to do that, because again, if you're not learning how to say no, if you're saying yes to everything, then you can't do anything. So you have to learn to say no, because when you learn how to say no, then it frees you to say now yes to what's important.
That's right.
And therefore that idea of saying no might be certain things like, I'm not going to go out, and party tonight. I'm not going to do these things because I want to be great here, because you, again, delay the instant gratification for some other things. And so I'm even in a point right now, both personally and in some of my coaching, where we're talking a lot about relationships. And I'm like, you have to get, and this is something else too, this whole idea, and that's where one of the things I got this idea of the halftime adjustments, because I am now like, I don't honestly, I don't care to be that person that says I live to 102. Because I'm like, what's the quality of life in those last couple of years anyway? I'm going to be that person where, man, if I hit 85 and I'm like, guys, we're going to go skydiving, and I'm the guy that's just going to forget the parachute. Like, I'm going to go out with my boots on and go out with a bang. But at the same time, it's like, all right, what are our best years? And there's a fear of like, and a lot of people live in the past. Like honestly, I couldn't be with a lot of my old high school friends because they were still living the glory days of high school. And I'm like, I just can't, because I'm forward thinking, not backwards thinking. Yeah. But anyways, what I'm getting to is on the relational side, I realized there's a lot of things I was doing that might have looked like success, but I was losing even some of myself. I was losing things like, and instead of asking like, what are my goals, what are my alignment, I started asking myself, how do I want to feel? Because I realized like and it's a question I have for the people I want to hang around. Because instead of saying like, all right, Josh, are you and I in complete alignment with where we want to go? Like, I don't care if you want to go hike the Himalayas and I want to go be on the ocean. Like, that doesn't matter to me as much as when I'm in your presence and you're in my presence, how do we make each other feel? Because if being around you makes me feel just like energized and $1 million and the things that how I want to feel, that says that is who I am, that's who I'm created to be, then every other area of my life that I'm going to put my endeavors is going to take off. Yeah. And if being around you, because like, I know how successful you are, And that's one of the reasons, yes, initially there's a partnering because it's like, all right, I know I can help you, you can help me. That's great. There's a symbiotic relationship. But if we're going to continue to work, that's not good enough.
Yeah.
And as we continue our partnership, it has to be a friendship. And that friendship, because when I'm around you, if I kind of feel like I'm a sellout or feeling like shit, or if for some reason you were asking me to grow my business in a way that just I didn't feel true to, it's not going to grow. Even if you know on paper it would, it won't, because my heart's not behind it.
That's right.
And so I am constantly asking the question when I'm in your presence, and I'm doing this for everyone. I'm just using our example.
Yeah.
When I'm in your presence, Josh, how do you make me feel about myself and about that? And if I don't have that dialed in, nothing else is going to work. So in the same way, if you are making millions, but you feel like shit on the inside, if you're insecure, if you feel like you're disappointing your wife in the bedroom, if you feel like you can't play with your kids, man, I can get emotional even talking about this because it's so important, because if the human heart's not in it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And when you die, no amount of success is going to go with you. And whatever you believe happens after you die. But I believe we're going to be judged on how well we loved one another and how true you were to your calling, who you were created to be. Yeah. Because if you're out there, I don't care, if you were, you have dogs, I have cats, I have a cat, but I'm like, if my cat tried to be a dog, no matter how much it thought the dog was cool, it just wouldn't be in its purpose. Yeah. In the same way, if the dog tried to do what my cat do, it's going to die, because my cat can scale and jump and do things that a dog would never be able to do. And guess what? They're both awesome, and they can both be appreciated for who they are. But if they try to operate outside of who they are meant to be, it's purposeless. Yeah. And so I really want people to connect to that more than anything else, because honestly, helping someone lose weight, helping someone get stronger, helping Odell run fast, that's actually easy. Once you know what you're doing. It's actually just like if you said, Chris, I can help business people make millions. Yeah. To you at this point, that's easy. Yeah. But if you don't make them feel what they need to feel, even though you give them, literally, if you literally do these 10 steps, you will be a millionaire. Yeah. They won't be, because it's not the ingredient that they really need, which has to come from that. So honestly, 100%. Even as I'm processing this and doing it, this will be a bigger cornerstone message of what we're trying to do. And that's what I want for people, because then you will feel successful because you're tapped into who you're created to be. And if you do that, every area of your life will begin to thrive.
That's right. Wow, dude, you have so much emotion when it comes to changing the lives of small business owners and business owners in general that want to have their health and their fitness back. It's amazing. I love being a part of the journey with you on that, for sure. If you guys want to check Chris out, go to chrisknott.com. You'll be able to see some of his stuff. But before we get off here today, obviously this is called Brain Drop. Yep. If you could give all of these people listening here today one piece of advice, one brain drop, what would it be?
Man, I think we saved the best for last. And what I was just saying, if I could give you one brain drop for today, because most people are looking for that nugget. Well, here's the nugget. How do you feel around the people that are closest to you? Because if I want to know who you are, the first thing I'm going to do is look at the 5 closest people to you.
That's right.
And then, now with what I've just defined, I'm going to ask you, how do those people make you feel? Mm-hmm. And if you can give me a solid answer, then I know where we can either fill up some tires or make some course corrections, or be like, you're set. And if you can't, that's where we're going to start. Yeah. So get in touch with that. And especially that's going to be hard for my very cerebral people, and I'm cerebral as well. But being able to tap into that and say, what does this make you feel? And does it make you, do you know how you want to feel based upon your design, your calling? Because if you're operating outside of that, then all the bolts are going to fall off.
That's right.
But if you can stay within that and then grow from that, if that is your hub and then all the spokes go, now you have a solid tire. But if you can't have a hub, you can't have the spokes, you can't have the tire, and everything's going to collapse. So how do you feel as it relates to the people closest to you, in the relationships that you have, and the things that you're endeavoring to do when you're making choices? Should I follow this person? Should I sign up for this? Should I learn from this person? Should I make that person a friend? Yep. How does it make you feel? Is it in alignment with who you are? And if it's not, do not be afraid to drop it.
That's right.
The faster you drop it, the less pain it's going to cause, and the more you can actually get back on track to where you want to go.
Love it. That's great advice. Thank you so much. Once again, if you want to see anything with Chris, go to chrisknott.com. Check him out. He's got an amazing course called Reprogram that's out right now. You can get involved in 12-week program. It's going to reset the way that you think about health and fitness. No joke. I've been a prodigy of it, and I love it, right? So if you guys want to check out Chris, once again, chrisknott.com. Thank you for coming today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.